It's the Revved Up 906 podcast, a Detroit Pistons podcast, to be exact. And I'm Hudson.
And I'm Ryan.
And before we get into episode number 32, yes, 32, we've officially hit episode number 32. Wow, crazy. 32 weeks we've been doing this. That's just what. But I want to make sure you guys like and subscribe because, yes, we have hit 100 followers and we are so close to getting 200. We're 99 more subscribers away from 200. So make sure to get us to 200 subscribers because we are growing in the Detroit Pistons community and it takes you guys to help us grow. So we appreciate you guys for viewing. So make sure to like and subscribe. And then also hit that share button. The share button below this YouTube video, you can share on any YouTube platform or any social media platform, rather. So share us to your friends and family so we can keep spreading word about the Revved Up 906 podcast. We bring you all the Detroit news and all the opinions and statistics, and we love doing it. So make sure to show some love. We appreciate you guys. Also, shout out Grind Clothing Co. They're the jam. They have some great designs out right now. So make sure to go follow them on Instagram. And you can find the link to their merch in our YouTube bio and the description of this video. We actually have merch through them. This is one of the sweatshirts you can buy. You can rep this in the gym, grocery store, library, anywhere you go, you can rep this. So make sure to go buy some of our merch and rep your favorite Detroit Pistons podcast. This week, episode number 32 that I got so in depth about. We are talking about possible free agents the Detroit Pistons can pick up this offseason as they prepare to outdo their 17-win season last season. And with the new coach in Monty Williams, there is so much possibility for this team. But of course, every offseason, there's so many things in question. And one of those things in question are NBA free agents. And we're going to highlight some guys that we could possibly see the Detroit Pistons picking up, or what's realistic or what's a little bit non-realistic that would be awesome if it did happen. One of the guys I want to highlight first is a guy I'm so excited to get Ryan's opinion on, because it's not a guy that I necessarily think the Pistons have to get. If it would happen, it'd be cool. But I think he could add a little bit of a dynamic the Pistons didn't have last season. And I'm really making Ryan wait because he's been so anxious to figure out who this guy is. He's actually a Michigan native, Kyle Kuzma. They have him predicted to be just under a 4-year deal, around $70 million. If you did the math, right now the Pistons have nearly $30 million in cap space. With any possible trades, it could possibly be more or less, but he is predicted to get around a 4-year deal, around $70 million. That's a lot. If you broke it up over 4 years, it would be $17.5 million. So the Pistons realistically can afford it. This is a guy that really, with the Wizards, showed that he could really provide an offensive repertoire to a team. And the Pistons, have a couple guys that can play power forward, but not true power forwards. What are your thoughts? I'm going to pull up while you're talking his stats from last season, but what are some of your first thoughts when thinking about the Pistons kind of rolling around in their brain, picking up Kyle Kuzma?
Okay. I think
Here,
I don't know what to say.
Let me list off his stats while you're thinking. While he was with the Wizards in the 22-23 season, he averaged 21 points, 7 rebounds, nearly 4 assists. And this is what always stands out to me. I always love the shot percentage. Shot 54% from the field, nearly 55. So this guy showing that he can get buckets, average over 20 points. That's a hard mark to reach in the NBA, getting over 20 points. And he stayed healthy for the most part last season, only 64 games, averaged 35 minutes per game for the Wizards. So a very crucial player, and he's not projected. I think he's actually declined, or he's not really happy with the re-up deal with the Wizards. It's a player option, and right now he's offered 13 million. So a little bit less than what he's projected to get if he did sign with another team. Your thoughts, Ryan? Just give us your thoughts. Your just unfiltered thoughts. Let's hear it.
I like him as a person. I just don't think he's the right fit for our team. And that's only because I don't think he's gonna want to go from the Wizards to the Pistons.
Two small
He's
markets.
no, it's not that necessarily. It's just the fact that you went from a bad Wizards team to an even worse Pistons team. I
Okay.
don't think he's going to want to do that, even if it is his home state team. And on top of that, Kyle Kuzma, I'm saying this in the nicest way possible, is kind of one of those cocky guys. He's one of
Yeah.
those ones that he knows he's the guy, and you're going to act like he is. Otherwise, he's not going to have anything to do with you.
Right.
Like you look at his time with LA, he was pretty darn good in LA. Why did he move on? LeBron didn't want him. That's why.
Right.
Realistically, goes to Washington. He was the second option in Washington behind Bradley Beal. But even then, that's why he averaged what he averaged. Not saying he's a bad player. It's just when you're a second option on a bad team, you're gonna get those stats pretty much.
Right.
And then the combination of having Isaiah Stewart possibly just shift completely to power forward, and then even having Marvin Bagley there and Eugene Amarui, I would say that I don't know if that would work because then those guys are not getting minutes because obviously you would start Kyle Kuzma over them. And then also Kyle Kuzma, I see also coming in trying to be Jeremy Grant in the sense that he thinks
Good
he's the
point.
guy. And I don't want that happening again because then that takes away from Cade and Jaden and Jalen and all these other key guys that we've added over the last couple of years.
Right.
I don't hate it because he's a great offensive player. But I also think budget friendly wise, paying him $17 million out of our pretty much
The
$30
chunk.
million cap space, you're not going to have much wiggle room after that to sign any more guys. And so I don't know if that's maybe necessarily the right move, but I would welcome it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've been on a kick of for some reason signing Michigan players. I think after all the Amoni Bates talk, and then we've seen guys like Isaiah Livers get picked up by the Pistons, in Kalamazoo, we're a lot in question with him. But I don't know. I've been kind of in a Michigan kick for some reason, but it was an idea I wanted to throw around because I do love his offensive skill set. But he hasn't, like you said, LeBron didn't want him in LA. And, he kind of worked out with the Wizards, but showing that he's probably not going to re up. So it's not like a match made in heaven. He hasn't proven to me that he can work with an offense. I think I liked your point about him being another Jeremy Grant or a Josh Smith in the early 2000s, where I think any night or a Bojan, like we saw last season, he's going to want to get his 25 shots up a game, and he doesn't care who gets in the way, he's going to get it. And I don't think that's really going to match up well with this current Pistons roster. I think the Pistons have proven that they're going to succeed when the balls get moved around. And Kyle Kuzma, I don't think is necessarily that type of player. But yeah, I mean, his offense speaks for itself. He knows how to get buckets. I think it would be most realistic to see getting a guy like Kyle Kuzma if we lose Bojan, if Isaiah Stewart's included in a trade, if Marvin Bagley's included in a trade. I think if we see a couple of those guys on the outs, then it's more realistic. But if there's no trades this offseason, I don't see it happening. What are one of your guys when thinking about possible free agent pickups are on the top of your list on who's still available for the Detroit Pistons?
So I don't have a specific order on my top five. There's no right or wrong answer. I think everyone uniquely could fit into this Pistons team, and majority of them are kind of on the grasp of being a wing or a stretch four along that
Okay.
lines. I have no bigs, true bigs at least. I kind of have guards, but not really. And I'd say my top guy maybe would be Cam Johnson.
Okay.
I just the fact that he's a free agent and he loves Monty. Monty coached him in Phoenix. Uh, I think Monty would want to bring
Right.
in one of his former players that's still relatively young and knows what he's capable of doing. And Cam Johnson, from what he's shown this past season, his contract's not going to be pretty hefty. And so by signing him, giving him a second chance, essentially, you'd also have a ton more cap space to go out and sign another guy. And I think Cam Johnson would be a great fit in the sense of what he can do offensively. And he doesn't have to be the guy that's the first option, second option, third option, fourth option. He's fine being whatever option you want him to be. That's who Cam Johnson is. In 17 games in Phoenix, he played 25 minutes per game for Monty, shot 47% from the field, 45% from three, 81% from the free throw line, averaged 14 points a game along with 4 boards and 2 assists, and he rarely turned the ball over or fouled. And that was with Monty in 17 games. And then 25 games in Brooklyn, he averaged 30 minutes, shot 46% from the field, 37% from three, 85% from the free throw line, and then was averaging near 18 points a game and 5 boards a game, along with 3 assists. So his minutes obviously went up in Brooklyn. His stats went up in Brooklyn, but that's also because Brooklyn sucks. No offense, but they do. Their best players, Mikal Bridges. Their two best players were Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson, who they got in exchange for Kevin Durant. So clearly Brooklyn kind of
Right.
won that deal, but not really. But still, the point of the matter is you saw how productive Cam Johnson was in 17 games with Monty Williams. Not only that, but Monty knows how to coach him. And just adding a guy like that in, even with Marvin Bagley and Isaiah Stewart in that roster shape up of a position, I think still has success because Cam Johnson is one of those teetering power forward, small forwards in the league where he can easily play both positions and he's fast enough and athletic enough to do it. And so, like, you move him, you could even be your starting small forward. You would have Kate at the one, Jaden at the two, Cam Johnson at the three. Either, and okay, the power forwards are irrelevant in this because our power forward would be like a Jalen Duren or a James Wiseman, flip flop
Right.
between there. But even then, that starting lineup, I would be scared looking at it. So that's one of my top guys. What do you think?
What I like about Cam Johnson is he's proven in Phoenix and in Brooklyn that he can work within an offense. He's a good pass first guy. He's a good off the catch and shoot. I think that would prove very successful with the Detroit Pistons. With a guy like Cam, how much do you think are you willing to give him of our cap space? Because he's a hot commodity right now. You know what you're going to get from him. You're going to get around that 15-point mark. How much would you be willing to pay him out of that 30 million in cap space per year? How much are you looking?
Well, I think when you look in comparison to Kyle Kuzma, and then also what the cap, well, what the salary would be between the two. Kyle Kuzma was sitting at roughly 17 million. I don't think Cam Johnson is worth 17 million. He's at
Okay.
least probably 14, 13 mil right
Okay.
now. And that I would easily pay him that because we'd still have over $15 million in cap space. And that's very reasonable, along with, let's say you do end up trading Bojan, you're back up to 30 million in cap space essentially. So I see this as a very realistic possibility.
What's your second or third guy for who the Pistons could pick up in free agency? We've talked a lot. We've talked about Kyle Kuzma, Cameron Johnson, pretty lanky guys. Is there any shooting guards or point guards that maybe you would set some focus on? And if there's a possible trade with the current roster or a cutting situation, what are some of your guards that you're looking at?
So I have two guards as honorable mentions.
Okay.
But one of them in my top five can play the guard. Actually, two of them, actually three of them can play the guard. But they're also mainly wings. And so you have the likes of Gary Trent Jr., which
Ooh,
for me is a very big one
yeah,
because you look at what he's done in Toronto this past season, played 66 total games, averaged 32 minutes a game, shot 43% from three, 36% from from three, 83% from the free throw line, averaged 18 to 19 points a game, 3 boards, 3 assists. Like, and he didn't turn the ball over or fouled all that much. And you see
right.
him play when, rather if it was either in Portland or even Toronto, he's one of those guys that you actually had to watch out for. And he was one of those quiet guys. So like you look at Cade and Jaden obviously drawing the most attention, but then you have Gary Trent Jr. coming out and sitting at the wing waiting for the three, and then bang, you're dead essentially. I see Gary Trent Jr. as one of those guys that he doesn't he hasn't played for a winning team yet in his career. Technically, you could say Toronto was a winning team with him because they made the playoffs, but they only did that for 1 or 2 seasons, so not that much, and they didn't even make it that far in the playoffs. They were swept in the first round both times. Then you
Yeah,
look at his time in Portland. They made the playoffs once with Gary Trent Jr. there, but that was pushing it and they were swept. So Gary Trent Jr. is just lacking a little bit more of that winning mentality. And I think he would be super excited, almost ecstatic, really, if he got a chance to work with a great coach in Monty Williams and then got to be like the third, fourth option on this young Pistons team. I think that would be very big for him.
this might upset some Detroit Pistons fans, but if you get Gary Trent Jr. in free agency this offseason, he's going to give you what Isaiah Livers hasn't given us since we drafted him. He's going to do everything that Isaiah hasn't been able to. He's going to give you the 3-point shot, the mid-range game, and then he's going to give you even better or match Isaiah Livers' defense. So I love that idea because we know that Hamidou Diallo isn't going to be more than likely re-upping with the Detroit Pistons. He sold his house in Auburn Hills. Okay, Isaiah Livers is proving that he's just not really cutting it right now. And Alec Burks only getting older every day. I love having him on the roster, but he's not going to be around forever. So I think if you bring in a guy like Gary Trent Jr., he's going to be explosive off the bench. And then if we deal with injuries again this next coming season, you can never predict it. Gary Trent Jr. is able to fill in at the 1 through 3 position. He's 6'5", 209 pounds. He can play the point guard if needed, and he can play small forward if needed. I love that idea. Gary Trent Jr. I think it'd be brilliant if we brought him in.
So one of my other guys just won the championship. I feel like it's an obvious no-brainer. Former Piston. I want to see who you think it is. Just guessing. I think it's obvious, but
Bruce Brown?
yep, Bruce Brown.
Okay. Let's get into it.
So everybody is expecting him to get the bag this offseason because of what he did this season for the Nuggets, but then also what he did for the Nuggets in the playoffs alone. What he did in, what was it, game 4 of the NBA Finals. My goodness, that
Yeah.
was spectacular. 21 points off the bench, and just lit it up, right? So you look at what he's done for that team, and you look at every single place he's been at, whether it's Brooklyn or Denver now, you've seen him take the next step. So with the Pistons, we really developed him into being a guy that can play 1 through 3 and can do a little bit of everything, but also have a lot more offensive responsibilities. We developed him into that. Then takes that next step in Brooklyn where he becomes more of one of the bigger options on that team. And he
Mhm.
really excelled at it. And then with Denver, they expected him to be a defensive presence, and that was about it. But he
Right.
still lit it up on offense, and he was a key player in them winning the championship this year. I see if he were to come back to Detroit, which I would be ecstatic about, he'd be
Yeah.
one of those perfect guys to come back because he can do just about everything you want him to do. And I think he's always loved Detroit. And so if you add that into a mix where he's a veteran presence now and he just won a championship, so he's hungry still. You add that with a young Cade Cunningham, a Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, mainly our entire roster, And then you add that with a great future Hall of Fame coach, depending on what happens with his career, and Monty Williams, and then our experienced coaching staff of former players. I think Bruce Brown would be ecstatic to come back to Detroit, but I also see him staying in Denver and signing a contract there. But it all depends on how much money he's wanting. But I would be ecstatic if he came back, because this season he played 80 games. He only missed 2 games this season, which is phenomenal. He
Yeah.
averaged 28 and a half minutes a game, shot 48% from the field, 35% from three. So you can tell he's already developed his shot even more. He shot 75% from the free throw line, averaged 5 rebounds, 4 assists, averaged 12 points a game. Like, that's great out of Bruce Brown.
Yeah, Bruce Brown is a guy too that's going to give you what Hamidou Diallo gave us last season. Hamidou gave us around averaged at points, 15 points a game, couple steals here and there. But Bruce Brown will give you that offense, but then also overall better defense. So I think losing a guy like Hamidou Diallo, if you bring in a guy like Bruce Brown, is really going to fix the absence that Hamidou is leaving in this season. But also add a whole nother level to the offense, because he's way better at ball movement and the flow of basketball. He's just a little bit higher IQ guy than Hamidou. So I love that addition. What do you think he's going to be asking for money wise? And do you think it's going to be with it? I mean, because it might be a back contract after like what he did in the finals. I could see it maybe hovering around maybe where Kuzma is going to be, or I think maybe a little bit in between Cam Johnson and Kuzma, maybe at that 15 mark, 15 million a year.
Yeah, I could see that. And I think if Denver wants him still, which I think they very much do, I think he would sign for significantly less to stay with Denver, just because of how good that roster is right now, and the likelihood of them actually winning another championship is very strong right now.
Yeah.
So I could see Bruce Brown returning for a very small contract in Denver. But now, if he actually truly wants the money, which for a player like him, it would be smarter to go for the money, if anything, because he's not one of those top tier Hall of Fame players. He's not. He's one of those key role players, and that's about it. So if he can get his money based off of his performance, then he's going to do that. So it all depends on if Denver's willing to give him that much money. But yeah, I would
Right.
say he's probably in the ballpark of 14 to 17 million dollars. I would say probably 15 he'd ask for right now, just given the fact that if you ask for 17 out of Bruce Brown, that's way too much. Nobody's going to pay him that.
Yeah,
If he
it's a
asks for
lot.
14 million, somebody's going to pay him that. But I think he'd rather try and get 15 to 16 million dollars to try and get a little bit more than what he's probably worth, because he's probably truly worth around 12 million right now. But even then, I would sign him if I was the Pistons.
I could see him maybe getting 17 if it was like a 2 year or something like that.
Yeah.
But if he's looking for a 4 year, yeah, he's probably hovering around 13, 14. I mean, that's a pretty big contract. A guy I wanted to talk about, and I'm really interested to see what you have to say on this, was Harrison Barnes, a small forward. He's an NBA vet, 6'8", 225 pounds, coming off the season with the Sacramento Kings, averaged 15 points per game, 4.5 rebounds, nearly 2 assists, 63% from the field. So very efficient. You know what you're going to get out of Harrison Barnes. That's why I'm assuming he might be a little bit out of our grasp, just because of money wise. NBA teams know that you're going to get shooting, a good veteran presence, and smart play from Harrison Barnes. So, whenever those guys are as consistent as a guy like Harrison, they're going to get paid. But why I like Harrison Barnes is because I talked about his veteran presence. I would love that around whatever draft pick we get at the small forward position in this year's draft. I think when you have a young team like the Detroit Pistons, it's great to kind of put around them these pros guys that have long careers in the NBA, that also are going to have a good presence behind the scenes, but also provide on the court and be able to put up numbers. And I think Harrison Barnes is that. I'm just worried he's going to be pretty expensive. What are some of your thoughts on Harrison Barnes?
So Harrison Barnes is actually in my top five. Something you did not mention is he played
Okay.
every single game this season. He did not
Oh, I
miss
love
a
that.
single game, and
That's
he's
cool.
31 years old. 31 years old, did not miss a single game. That's very impressive. That's probably the
Yeah.
most impressive thing out of his stats this year. Um, and I will go off of this and say I don't think he's going to be worth that much money because
Okay.
once you hit 30, you have to be like Steph Curry or LeBron to get that money. And he's
Right.
not like Steph Curry or LeBron. He's definitely on the downslope of his career because like look at last season, he was averaging 17 points a game. He's down to 15 this year. Granted, they added a couple more offensive pieces that Sacramento didn't have the year before. But then even you look 2 years ago, Harrison Barnes was averaging 20 points a game. So you can tell he's on the downhill slope of his career.
Right.
He's definitely just going to try and either look for a contender or a team he really sees a bright future in. And I think if the Pistons really wanted to hone in on developing their guys, you sign a guy like Harrison Barnes because Harrison Barnes can develop two, three, and four, and even five. They can really. He's the kind of guy and player that can develop every single position on this team because he's played with Steph Curry, he's played with Klay Thompson, he's played with De'Aaron Fox, Draymond Green, Domantas Sabonis. He's played with all of these guys that are great at what they do and truly from Hall of Fame to key role players. That's how he's played the last couple seasons. And so when you add that experience into a young team like this, I think it'd be great. And honestly, a little bit of a bold take, but I think if he were to sign with us, even if he is 32 years old, he's starting. Whether it's at the three or the four, he is starting. Because I would actually put him ahead of even having Jalen Duren and James Wiseman on the floor together, just because of his experience and how good he is. Because there was a reason why he was a top 10 pick in the draft. He's that
Right.
good. So if we were to sign him, I'd start him right away.
Yeah, and he's coming from a team that was very successful in the playoffs this year. The Sacramento Kings, as a whole, as an organization, really took a step up this last season. So, and he's a big part of that offensively. A really crucial player for that Sacramento Kings team. I think if you add him to the Detroit Pistons, and add a guy that has come from winning culture, being with the Golden State Warriors, the Sacramento Kings, and add him into this roster. And with the loss of guys like Bojan, Hamidou, maybe an Isaiah Livers, I think there's a lot of room for a guy like him. And whatever rookie we get in the draft, we're assuming it's going to be a small forward or a four. I think it'd be great to have Harrison Barnes around a guy like that. And it would give that draft pick some time to develop behind the scenes or as a role player while Harrison Barnes is flourishing at the starting position or the sixth man. And we'll give that rookie some time to not have so much pressure, with what usually comes along with the fifth pick. Before we wrap up episode number 32, what are one of the last guys you want to highlight as a possible pickup in free agency for the Detroit Pistons?
Dante DiVincenzo.
Okay, I like
The
it. Let's
reason
get
I
into it.
throw him out there is because he's one of those guys that can play one, two, and three. And you see what he did with the Warriors this past season. He was a key role player. He was one of those guys to come off the bench and give you a ton of energy. And otherwise, he also did start for the Warriors this past season. He played 72 games, averaged 28 minutes a game, shot 43% from the field, 40% from three, 82% from the free throw line, averaged 10 points, five boards, four assists. Like he really is one of those guys to do it all. And he doesn't need to be the guy to be effective. And he knows that. He knows at the NBA level, he's just going to be one of those key role players, and that's about it. So you add him into the mix of our current lineup, he's fine coming off the bench in our current lineup. He really is.
Right.
And that's why I think it'd be a good connection because we need those kind of players to really come in this offseason. We just need key role players, really.
Yeah, I like Dante because he's a guy that kind of checks all the boxes. He's athletic, he can shoot, he can get the ball in the paint, he can be a solid passer when needed. His defense isn't completely standout, but he can really hold his own defensively. He's lanky, he's tall. So I like having a guy that you pick up in free agency that can guard the 1 through 3 position, or start at the 1 through 3 position. I think with a team like the Pistons, you need to add in a guy that isn't necessarily a lockdown defender, isn't necessarily a go-to scorer. We just need a guy that can do a little bit of everything, that can give a push off the bench and fill in for the starters if needed. Coming off a season dealing with so many injuries, you're really weary. And I think the front office are at a point where they're like, okay, we need to stack up our bench a little bit, because if we have another season where we're plagued with injuries, we need, guys to be able to step in where we don't have another 17-win season because of injuries. So I think a guy like Dante is a great option for a possible free agent pickup. Real quickly, what are one of your honorable mentions?
So it would be what's his name? Crap. It was let me see here. Okay, where is he?
Real quickly, I can say my honorable mention because I don't need to get into him too much. But Josh Richardson was one of my guys. He's a shooting guard. I thought maybe he's another guy that could play the 1 through 3 without having to give him a fat contract like some of these other guys.
Mm-hmm.
What's one of your honorable mentions there, Ryan?
Gabe Vincent.
Oh yeah. I can see him having a good.
I actually see him re-signing with Miami, but if he doesn't, he is 27 years old next year. But that is good too, because what he's been able to show who he is as a player and an individual, as an undrafted player, it's just he's one of those select good few players in the NBA. And I think he could really. So like the saying goes in football, where you have a good quarterback, but you want to add a top tier free agent in and see what happens out of it, like a quarterback battle. That's how I see this offseason happening. Is I think we need to get one of those top mid-level point guards, because they'd go after like a Killian Hayes as an example, or even a Jaden Ivey or a Cade Cunningham as an example, to really put them to work. Because I think Cade and Jaden are fine, but I think Killian is still needing to get tested a little bit, even though he had a phenomenal year this past year. I think he does need to get tested a little bit more. I think Gabe Vincent would be one of those guys to do it. Plus, let's say Gabe Vincent has a great start of the season. He has a ton of value at the trade deadline, and you can move him out for assets. That's just one of those guys that I'd be happy bringing in.
I do agree that Killian needs some pressure this season. There's some reports earlier this week that Killian has reached out to the front office to talk about a possible re-up. But I don't know if the front office is going to give it to him super easily. I think there's going to be a lot to talk about when addressing Killian Hayes getting re-upped off his rookie contract. Well, that will do it for episode number 32. This week we talked about possible free agents that the Detroit Pistons can pick up with their $30 million in cap space. Comment below what you guys think of possible free agents, if you agree or disagree with some of our guys. And then if you have maybe a better idea of who the Pistons could possibly pick up. And we appreciate you guys for viewing, and make sure to like and subscribe. We will see you guys in episode number 33. Peace.